That had to be a game last night that we might circle and look back to.
That is probably, without a doubt, the worst loss the Flyers have had all season, and somehow they ended up benefiting from it. I mean, the difference between some of these buzzer beaters and last night was that the whole game was building to that point. The Flyers basically said, we're only going to win this game if Steve Mason steals it for us, and he nearly did. I mean, there was a point, and I wasn't in Columbus, so I was watching the game on TV. When Wayne Simmons takes that slap shot the length of the ice and it goes for icing, they pan back to him and he kind of shrugged like, oh, well, we're up 2 goals with 9 seconds left or whatever the case may be. That's where it started coming unraveled. Steve Mason did everything he could yesterday, and that was probably the worst loss the Flyers have had all season long.
Dave, I had that right here. That's the first thing I was bringing up, the Simmons slap shot to the empty net, and then the feeling after that, you're kind of like, this is not going to go well. I had the same feeling of like, he kind of shrugged his shoulders, and I'm like, oh, man, what are you doing? And it's the way they score that goal on that misdirection that makes you feel like this is not going to go well. And you wonder, look, you just said it. They needed Mason to win that game for them. You wonder if these back-to-backs in this schedule, they had nothing last night. Those first 2 periods, they brought nothing to the table. You wonder if they're starting to hit that wall a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think fatigue is starting to become a factor, and that completed 4 back-to-backs. The Flyers have 3 back-to-backs left in the remainder of their season. 6 games out of the final 10 are now back-to-back situations for them, and if they show up like that in the second half for the rest of them, they're certainly not making the playoffs. That's the kind of loss that takes a team, just totally derails their season and takes them out of a playoff hunt. The fact that the Flyers have 9 lives here and Detroit ended up losing last night in regulation was absolutely monumental for them. I mean, they actually have a reason now to look at this and say, we got away with one and we can still keep going. That's the kind of loss. The way that they lost that game, Dave, was how teams miss playoffs.
Yeah, but this is like, I remember having this conversation with you last year where they were charging from the backside and it looked like they had no shot, and then it was like, you know what? I think they might get there. And then they would lose to Buffalo. And it's like, yeah, okay, right. They beat Detroit, they beat Chicago, and then they lose that game to Columbus. And it seems like this is the game that they can't shake even over the last couple of years.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's what makes it even worse, is that's the worst team in the division. The Flyers beat them by a touchdown earlier this month. And then to go in there and lay an egg last night was you can't really forgive that.
No, and what's your thought on the goalie situation down the stretch here with Neuvirth out? How many games does Mason go over this last stretch?
Well, that's the thing. By losing that game last night, that puts them in such a tough situation where they kind of have to ride Mason now. He may end up playing all 10 remaining games. I thought for sure that Stolarz would get 1 game in there. Now they have to beat Colorado, and they have to beat Arizona to finish this road trip. I mean, it's become so important that, and Anthony Stolarz very well may be the Flyers goalie of the future, but you can't trust a guy to make his NHL debut in a situation that's this difficult, no matter who he is.
Dave Isaac's with us at Dave G. Isaac. It's ironic, too, because you were just talking, you wrote the piece about the power play unit, and in overtime last night, how many chances on the doorstep do they get? And you're thinking, man, if you want to be a playoff team in that power play situation against that team with that unit on the ice, you got to put one home there. They miss so many opportunities, especially in the overtime.
Yeah, I mean, the overtime, I think they kind of get a lift. I think they have a sense of confidence when it gets to that point. When there's 1 minute left in overtime, that's a different story because they can see the shootout coming. That was probably Steve Mason's best shootout game that he's had in quite some time. When you ask him to make, 3 saves, I guess, that he made in the shootout, all in the same night. I mean, that's not something that he's been very good at in the shootout. So he did everything. I mean, Dave Haxall may as well have made him the first shooter in the shootout because he did everything else last night.
Dave, down the stretch they come. What do you think the Flyers' record needs to be here over these final 11?
They've got 10 left.
10, sorry, 10, last night was
I don't know. The key is, like Pittsburgh, I think they're too far ahead now. The key is beating Detroit. Jake Voracek said that they would need 95 points. Whatever he said the other day was I think 7-4-1, and they got one out of the 7 down. They got the one out of 1 down. So if they finish going 6-4, that might be enough. But I think they might have to do a little bit better than that. I think they may have to go 7-3, 7-3, or 7-2-1, or something like that the rest of the way here to get in.
They have, as you mentioned, 3 back-to-backs left. Pittsburgh twice down the final week of the season, Detroit in the middle, and then that Islander game on the final Sunday of the year at 7 o'clock on Sunday night to close out the year. Do you think they have a shot to get to the Islanders?
Yeah, I think they have a shot to get to the Islanders because the Islanders are only, I think, one back of where they are now.
Well, they're 2 points.
The gap is now between the Islanders and Pittsburgh. I don't think Pittsburgh is as attainable. But once they get in, I think, and they are in after last night getting the 1 point, I think that they could even still potentially catch the Islanders. But they're going to need help now. They could have done this on their own, and now they're going to need a little bit of help to get up to that top wild card spot. They could keep winning and potentially stay where they're at in that second wild card spot. But I think to move up ahead of that, I think they're going to need a little bit of help.
Yeah. All right, Dave, of course, the Flyers back in action tomorrow night against Colorado. And as Dave mentioned, in Arizona now on Saturday before they come home and take on Winnipeg. These are winnable games, though. But the interesting part with some of these games, including tomorrow, is they're placing teams now that are in the same situation that they're in.
Right. And Colorado is now doubly down because they lost 2 of their top players to injuries, and that'll be the second game that they'll have missed out of the 2 that they said they were going to miss for sure. So the Flyers get a break there, but if they go into it thinking that it's going to be easy like it looked like they did last night, they're going to be in for a surprise.
All right, we'll have the game tomorrow night here on 97.3 ESPN at Dave G. Isaac. Courier Post online as the Flyers on the road trip, which is continuing here, a 4-game road trip before they come home on Monday night. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for having me.